Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys all about Penelope Douglas and her books. So I am really excited to be filming this video for you guys. As you probably know if you've watched my channel for any length of time, Pen is one of my absolute favorite romance authors. She wrote my favorite romance of all time, Punk 57, and I thought it was only fitting for this Valentine's Day season to give you guys kind of a rundown or a guide to Penelope Douglas's books. I have read all of her full-length novels, and so I feel like I definitely have a grasp on what she's written and what books you might like if you have read other books by her. Before we get into it, I thought it would be kind of important to give you a rundown on Penelope and her books as a whole, and then we can kind of get into what I recommend. So first of all, Penelope is an author who is very good at writing character relationships and character development. You really feel the tension and the steam between characters. That being said, all of her books have a very distinct feel. No two books from her are the same. So if you really liked Birthday Girl, which I know a lot of you guys do, that does not guarantee that you're going to love all of her books. I personally can see the similarities amongst all of her books, but I know some people are going to find issue with maybe some of her darker things if they only know like Birthday Girl, for instance. Another thing that I think bears repeating and bears saying is that all of her books are incredibly steamy. If you're someone who has pretty much only been reading Christina Lauren or some of those other kind of chick lit rom-com-y books, these are not that. So if you're looking for something with very low heat levels, don't read these books. If you're looking for something very spicy, definitely pick up a Pen book. And number three, if you are someone who really craves a very firm yes when it comes to consent in romances, these books might not be for you. Whenever I read them, I personally find no issue with the consent, but that seems to be a refrain, something that seems to be repeated over and over in reviews that I've read of her works. Some people don't like, bullying aspects because, if you're being bullied, can you really fully give consent, that sort of thing. In my eyes, everything that I've read from her is consensual, but I just thought that bared saying because I don't want people to go into these books not knowing what they're getting themselves into. And as always, all of these books have varying content levels, and I'll try my best to kind of walk you through those, but I would also recommend reading reviews of her books before you go into one. I wouldn't want anyone to be triggered by any of the content in her books. So without further ado, let's kind of get into it. I think first what I'm going to do is give you a rundown on each book individually, just kind of a short summary on these books and kind of what they are about. I'm going to go roughly in publishing order, starting first with her series and then moving into her standalone books. After that, I'm going to give you guys kind of an if you liked this, you might like this from her, and then I'm going to give you my personal suggestion if you want to read her books from start to finish, what that reading order would look like. Okay, so the first book that Pen ever wrote or that was ever published is Bully, which is the first book in the Follow-Away series. This book follows Jared and Tate, and much like the name implies, it is a bully romance. This book is told from a first-person singular POV. We follow Tate as she's kind of trying to navigate her senior year of high school. She has been bullied by Jared pretty much through the entirety of high school, and they finally kind of reach a breaking point, have to kind of work on their relationship. She kind of gets to know why he's bullying her, and that's sort of what this book is all about. This is definitely not my favorite Penelope Douglas book. It is definitely a first book from an author, and I think in my personal opinion, Punk 57, which I'll talk about later, is sort of the more grown-up version. I mean, it's still set in high school, but it's got kind of a more sophisticated feel to it. I think that is mostly because in this first series that Pen wrote, all of the books are told in a singular POV, which doesn't tend to work for me as well. I like to kind of know the motivations of both characters, both male and female. That being said, I know a lot of people absolutely adore Bully, and it is their favorite book in all of her series, but I just thought I would let you guys know, obviously, that it's not my absolute favorite. The next book in the series, book number 2, is Rival. This follows Maddox, who is Jared's best friend from the first book. We definitely get to know him in the first book, and we know that he is kind of the less angsty, more playful version of Jared, and he ends up falling for his stepsister Fallon. So we open up with Fallon coming back from boarding school. She has been gone for 2 years, and she has to face Maddox and their shared history, which kind of slowly unfolds over the course of the book. And I really like this one. It's definitely not my favorite one in the series, but I did truly enjoy it. I really did like the relationship that Maddox and Fallon develop over the course of the book, and I think Fallon is definitely one of the more unique heroines that Pen has written. So if you're looking for kind of a non-blonde, non-traditionally beautiful, I guess you could say, heroine, I definitely think that you're going to really enjoy this book. The third book in the series is Falling Away, which follows the half-brother of Jared. His name is Jackson, and his relationship with Casey, who is the best friend of Tate from the first book. So definitely a lot of tie-in through the series. All of the books are definitely standalone. They can be read on their own, but I think you kind of form a connection with all of the characters as you read through the series. So I definitely recommend sticking with the whole series if you're going to read these books. But that being said, Jackson Jackson and Casey are definitely my favorite couple of the series. I really like Jackson. He has that brooding, damaged hero sort of thing going on, which is definitely something that I personally adore, so I really like this book. And then the last book in the series is A Flame, which follows Tate and Jared a few years later. We find out that they have broken up and they are kind of trying to figure out their lives, figure out what they want. Because all of these books are set in high school, I think it's really cool that we got to revisit Jared and Tate and that things aren't perfect and they kind of have to work on figuring themselves out and figure out how they can be in each other's lives. I thought this book was incredibly well done. To me, it is second only to Falling Away in this series. For some reason, I just liked this more than Bully. I like seeing characters kind of go through things and grow together, so I really adored this book. Overall, I definitely enjoyed the series. It is not my favorite of her series. She only has 2. This is not my favorite, but I really do enjoy these books for what they are. But that leads me into Pen's darker series, which is her Devil's Night series. It starts out with Corrupt, and it follows Erica Fane and her relationship with her boyfriend's older brother, Michael. I would say the series is a lot different than her first, and I think part of it is the ability to push the bounds of what is acceptable in romance. The first series was published by Penguin Random House, and I think Pen felt like she had to kind of stay in this neat box. And with the Devil's Night series, you can definitely see some of her creativity and flair come out, which I really like. I like the plot and kind of the extra little details that are added in to the series. The whole series I would kind of describe as like The Nightmare Before Christmas meets Halloween meets a new adult bully romance. A lot of the events in this book take place on Devil's Night, which is kind of around Halloween, if not on Halloween. I honestly can't remember, but it's basically a night when 4 super hot dudes terrorize their town. They're super rich too, I feel like I should probably say that. And it's kind of about them getting in trouble, causing mayhem, and falling in love, sort of. We find out that 3 of these 4 guys ended up going to jail after the events that happened one Devil's Night back when they were in high school, and these 3 guys are getting out of prison when the book starts. So the events in every book kind of take place both in past and present. We get to see them doing hood rat shit with their friends in high school. We also get to see the repercussions of what they've done and what it's like to be released from prison and kind of what your life looks like after that. So I like the kind of dual timelines you're getting in all of the books. And the first book is about the one guy of the 4 that didn't end up going to prison, Michael, falling for Erica, and he believes that Erica is the reason that his 3 friends went to prison. So he's obviously seeking revenge. Michael is the kind of head honcho, super rich bad boy of the group. I don't want to say he's the most stereotypical of all 4 of them, but I would say the most archetypical. You know, like just if you think like bad boy, rich, rude, definitely Michael. Overall, the first book is not my favorite in the series, but I do really appreciate what it does in setting up the character relationships, setting up the relationships between the 4 guys. They're definitely very close after the events of what has happened in the books, and you can definitely see that manifest in some of the steamier scenes, which is always fun. So anyway, let's move on to the second book. It's Hideaway, and this book follows Kai, who we obviously get to know pretty intimately in Corrupt, and I do mean intimately. He is sort of the softer, more repentant character. He definitely faced a really hard time in prison. He kind of had to grapple with his humanity and his morality, and when he comes out, you can definitely tell that he is the softest and kindest of all of the guys. He ends up kind of acting as a foil, honestly, to Michael in the first book, but he ends up falling for a character named Banks, and it's sort of a fake dating situation. I really liked this book, especially more than the first, because I feel like the characters are a little bit more complex and complicated, and this book really just excellently sets up the third book, which is my favorite in the series, so I think that's why I have such a soft spot for the second book. That being said, the second book does stand well on its own. I do really like the events and the relationships and the complications of the second book. Moving on to the third book, Kill Switch, which happens to be one of my favorite Pen books of all time, follows Damon and Winter, and this is sort of a childhood friends that get separated sort of romance, which is kind of, I guess, the case for most of these. Not everybody has like a true childhood friends to lovers situation, but in this one, that's kind of what it is. Damon is one of the 4 guys, obviously, and he is easily the most loathed. He was one that I absolutely hated in the first and second books, but of course Pen was able to redeem his character by showing us the trauma that he faced when he was younger. I know that that's probably not gonna work for everybody. I know some people are gonna be not convinced at his redemption, but I absolutely adored this, and my friends who also really like Pen's books say that this is one of their favorites from her. I will say this one has some of the darkest content of any of the Penelope Douglas books that I have read, so definitely check the trigger warnings before you dive into this one, but the redemption arc was definitely something that I needed, and I just absolutely love this third book, and it's getting me so excited for the fourth one. Obviously it hasn't come out yet, so I can't really talk about that, but I'm sure that I'm going to adore it just as much. I think honestly though, like the third book in Penn's series are always my favorite, so I think this is probably always going to be my favorite in all of them. But anyway, moving on. Let's talk about Penn's standalones. The first book that she ever published standalone, and she did publish this with a traditional publisher. I think it was with Penguin Random House. It's Misconduct, and this book is about a pro tennis player turned teacher falling for the father of one of her students. And it's a little bit more complicated and dark and twisty than that, but that's sort of the gist and a non-spoilery kind of summary. This is probably my least favorite of Penn's standalones, probably because I don't think the plot is quite as strong. There is a plot twist near the end of the book, but overall this book is just a traditional romance. So if you like that sort of thing and you like really steamy scenes, I think you're gonna enjoy this. There is obviously that element of taboo. She is, I would say like 10 years younger than the love interest. So if you like an age gap, semi-taboo but not too taboo romance, you're probably going to enjoy this one. The next standalone that Penn published is Punk 57, which as you guys know is my favorite Penn book of all time. It just really speaks to my middle and high school self who really felt misunderstood and was just waiting for the perfect swoopy haired, lip ring wearing, emo, in a band kind of boy to save me. So this is another bully romance, but this one, unlike Bully, is a dual POV romance, so we get the points of view of both Misha and Ryan and why Misha is so angry at Ryan's actions. It's also a pen pal romance, which I didn't know that I liked, but I fucking love that trope. They are childhood friends, but they don't know each other's true identity, which also comes into play in this book. Again, I liked this book because the plot is a lot stronger than the Bully series, but again, it does have that sort of like new adult bully romance thing going on. It's just, it's perfect. I love the overall message of this. I loved the plot. Everything about this worked for me. So nothing's ever gonna top this book, but the one I'm gonna talk about next comes really close, and that is Birthday Girl. I realized that I didn't hold up Punk 57 when I was talking about it because I'm stupid, but Birthday Girl is an age gap kind of taboo romance between a girl named Jordan who falls for her boyfriend's father named Pike. The premise of this book I think makes it seem a lot more taboo than it really is because in my opinion this is probably the most tame of all of Penelope's books. I also think that it has some of the strongest character development and a slow burn of any of her books, so if you really live for a slow burn romance but you do want some of that smuttier content, I think you're really gonna enjoy this book. This is probably, like I said, my second favorite of all of her books. It really, it's perfect. I like the message, and even though again that there is that sort of like age gap, the characters are definitely right for each other and it is the right time in their lives to come together. So I really like this book. This is one that I recommend to people left and right. I think these two are kind of the gateway into Penn's books. And then in direct contrast to Birthday Girl, which is her most tame book in my opinion, we have Credence, which is one of the wildest things I've ever read. This book definitely takes the cake as Penn's most taboo romance to date, and it is the most different, I would say, than any of her other books. She also has a note in the back of the book which states that she was really trying to kind of push the envelope and not get too predictable when she wrote this book, and I think that's very evident when you read it. The book is about a girl named Tiernan whose parents die at the very beginning of the book. We see that she's kind of estranged from them, not very close with them, and she is forced to go and live with her step-uncle and his two sons in the mountains of Colorado. And the whole time that you're reading, you're kind of guessing which of the three guys she's gonna get with. She ends up definitely romantically involved with all three of them, and I really liked this book. I think this was such a strong book from Penn, mostly because of the character development that Tiernan goes through in the course of this honestly pretty fucking long book. Tiernan is very depressed, she's grieving, she is very emotionless in the beginning of the book. You feel depressed honestly reading it. Not that it's a depressing book, but you feel very close to Tiernan as a character. Watching her come out of her shell and sort of come into her own throughout the course of the book is something that I think is really special and is not necessarily duplicated in any of Penn's other books. And I also think that the steamy scenes in this book are just so fucking excellent. They are very taboo, they are very different than anything I've ever read before, but I really appreciated it. I appreciated just everything that she did with this book. It was really good. That being said, a lot of people didn't end up loving who Tiernan ends up with, so I think if you don't want to be disappointed but don't mind kind of being spoiled, definitely read the spoilers for this book first. I think that kind of gets you to notice all of the little details that she's putting into the character that Tiernan ends up with. Anyway, that's all I'm gonna say about that. But definitely check the trigger warnings for this book and make sure that you're kind of okay with a little bit of dubious consent. Okay, so those are all of Penn's full-length novels. I'm not gonna talk about any of her novellas because while I do think they really fill in the gaps of some of her stories, I'm feeling kind of lazy and I don't want to talk about them, so we're not gonna talk about them. What we will do, however, is talk about kind of the suggestions I would make for getting into Penelope Douglas's work, and if you've read some of her more popular books, which books I would say to start reading afterwards. So I would definitely say either start with Punk 57 or Birthday Girl, whichever one sort of appeals to you more is what I would say start with. Punk 57, again, is that typical new adult bully romance. Birthday Girl is that taboo age gap sort of thing. I would say if you're gonna start with Punk 57, I would then either try the Fall Away series or the Devil's Night series. I think depending on what you enjoyed in this book, either of those series is gonna be a good fit for you. If you really liked the bully aspect, but you didn't necessarily like all of the twisty plot, definitely go into Fall Away. If you like some of the darkness and you crave even more of that, definitely try the Devil's Night series. If you're gonna decide to try Birthday Girl instead, I would say go into Misconduct after this. Misconduct has a similar feel. It's got that age gap. It's a little bit more wholesome, I guess you could say, than some of her other books. I think a lot of people would say that the natural progression from Birthday Girl would be Credence. I kind of disagree with that. This one, again, it seems more taboo than it really is, but Credence is actually really fucking taboo, so I wouldn't necessarily make the jump to go that way. If you did enjoy this, but you wanted it to be even darker, even more angsty, then maybe try Credence. But like I said, I would do Misconduct after you read this one rather than Credence. I mean, obviously, if you like pick one of these, you could read the other one too. I would actually say to read these two first and kind of see which you enjoyed more and which route you want to take, or if you want to just read all of them, that's great too. And if that's the case, I'm going to tell you guys the way in which I would read her books and her series and sort of the logic behind that. The first thing that I would start out with is her Fall Away series. I think if you want to have read all of her books, this is a great place to start because I don't think it's a series that you necessarily are going to want to go back to after you've read something like Punk 57. I feel like the Fall Away series would be a little bit disappointing after reading this, so definitely start with Fall Away series. After that, I would say go into Punk 57. I think this is a good sort of appetizer, if you will, for Penelope's more dark and taboo books, and it'll kind of let you know if Devil's Night or something like that is going to be for you. So after Punk 57, I would definitely say go into the Devil's Night series. God, I love these books. They're just so fun. They're so dark. They're so gritty. After reading that, I would say go into Misconduct. I think you're gonna still have some of that like residual darkness, some of that grit. You're not gonna go from a dark book to a super light book, but it's a little toned down, a little bit of taboo, just like a little bit. And then after that, you can go into Birthday Girl, which is again a little bit more lighthearted. It's like you're on an upswing. You've read the really dark shit and now you're on an upswing, and you get that sort of delicious age gap, slow burn romance. And then after that, if you want to top it all, you want it to be crazy and you want to read the most taboo shit you've ever read, maybe, perhaps, and try Credence. So that's the order that I would read things in. And I think when I decide to kind of do a full reread of Penn's entire bibliography, backlist, whatever, this is the order that I'm going to take. But yeah, that is it. That is my kind of guide to Penelope Douglas and her books. Like I said, I don't think you can go wrong with any of her books. I think Punk 57 or Birthday Girl is an incredibly great place to start. I hope this was helpful for you guys in some way. Again, I know a lot of you guys have been DMing me, asking me like, yo, I liked Punk 57, what the fuck do I read next? I hope this answered that for you guys. I don't think anyone else does it like Penn. I don't think that if you liked Punk 57 that I can recommend a book by another author that's gonna even come close to this. So again, I hope this was helpful so you know what to read after reading, you know, Punk 57 or Birthday Girl. But anyway, I hope you guys are having an amazing Valentine's season. I hope you're feeling full of love. I love you guys so much, and until next time.